I've been doing some digging into the David case and I found some really interesting stuff. So, over the next day or so, I'm going to do a couple breakdowns on some new pieces of information that I've seen that I think are very interesting, and they're just going to add more fuel to the fire that David is completely cooked. But as I'm digging deeper and I'm finding a lot of interesting things, I'm still putting a few clues together, but it's looking so obvious to me that this guy is completely finished. There's a lot of people that have been theorizing and wondering, well, what on earth is David going to say when it comes to the defense? How the hell is this guy going to try and defend himself? He's pled not guilty. What possible explanation could he have had for this? So there's a really interesting thread that's going around on Reddit right now that basically is kind of giving some theory on what David's only possible defense could be, and I thought it was really interesting. So if we get into it, maybe we're going to be able to actually get a prediction for exactly what defense David is going to use, and perhaps whether or not there is maybe a small chance that he might be able to get away with this if he says the right thing. Is there anything that he could say based on all this evidence that's in front of us that would change things? I'm not rooting for David. I think he's a scumbag and I think he's cooked, but I think it would be worth thinking about these things. So this post is going around. I thought this would be worth looking into. So this says, David's only defense. It said, I think his defense team and their wording is kind of telling. They didn't address any other allegations, only the murder part. They said he did not murder Celeste and was not the cause of her death. To me, that sounds like they might not be arguing that he had nothing to do with anything. It sounds more like they may be arguing that he did not cause her death. My theory is that they might say she overdosed or died some other way first, considering they found drugs in her system. Now, I don't know whether this original poster has the information. There's been a lot of debate about drugs and alcohol in the system. Inconclusive. She might have been prescribed Ritalin. The meth, right? She might have had Adderall, Ritalin legally prescribed. The alcohol could have been explained by the decomposition process rather than actually, her being drunk. But anyway, they think that they might put forward that theory that she OD'd or died some other way, and that he panicked because of the relationship with the minor and tried to get rid of the body. That would explain why they're focusing on cause of death. They could basically argue he might be guilty of something, but not murder, PDF charges, all right? So obviously the problem for that argument is the medical examiner ruled her death as a homicide from penetrating injuries, so the defense would probably have to argue those injuries happened after she was already dead. I'm not saying this is what happened, I'm just saying the defense's wording makes me think that they're going to attack causation. So it says manner of death was homicide and caused stab wounds. Overdose defense won't fly. And then they're saying the defense's own forensic team might argue against that, considering the body was severely decomposed. I think it raises caution as to the findings being 100% concrete. People are saying, I think that will be a tough and dangerous boat for the defense to row into court. If the prosecution has even one witness say that the drugs found in Celeste's system were from David or his own drug suppliers, it will blow up in their face. The medical examiner can show slides of knife cut marks on her rib cage. Time of death could be disputed. Juries are reluctant to impugn a sitting medical examiner in favor of a hired expert, but there are Uber records showing her arrival at his house. Then there's all the evidence related to his purchase of chainsaws, body bag, blue pool, same plastic found in the post-mortem cut wounds. It tells a gruesome story, and if anyone else was at David's house committing this heinous crime, he'll need to get on the stand and say so. So someone is saying that's what the defense is going to argue. I'm not a forensic expert. I don't know what they'll try and explain. I don't know how they'll try and explain the way the penetrating wounds and how they had a smooth and ovular shape were, but I've heard forensic experts indicate that based on her decomposition, it's going to be very difficult to know for certain that she didn't overdose, and it's really going to come down to how much faith the jury has in the lab. It's because of my job. I'll be interested to see if anything is made of this. So this is accreditation mark on the toxicology report. I have an appreciation for its significance. I'm curious to hear testimony. The mark means that a US accrediting body confirmed the lab conforms to an international standard. So I'm wondering if they're going to verify all the work that was performed in the toxicology was covered under the scope of accreditation, if there's been any history. So basically, this is saying that they're going to try and get records and potentially actually poke holes in the credibility of the post-mortem examination. It says, will the defense try and impeach their credibility by looking into their accreditation and audit results? Will they have an expert witness review the results from their audits in the recent accreditation cycle to see if there's anything of concern regarding certain patterns of non-conformance? Will the defense subpoena records from internal audits and management review? Just file that under more examples of shit that Holio Bung gets excited for that no one else cares about. Okay, interesting. So Someone's saying, I think the medical examiner was able to determine she was stabbed ante-mortem. Maybe the defense will hire their own experts to dispute the autopsy results, but they will be grasping at straws. The whole evidence is absolutely damning. Pretty straightforward case. Every case seems straightforward before the defense gets involved. Defense or prosecutors always present their own experts. So it seems like a lot of people are thinking, all right, let me just break this down for you guys quickly, because I think this is really, really interesting. And I think this thread is giving me some of the clearest indications of how I think, just in my personal experience and experience from covering criminal trials related to famous people, how this is going to go down, in my opinion. I think that they're going to clutch at straws. I think if David's legal team don't drop him after finding out all that information, I think they might only have straws to clutch at, might not have a hand to reach out for, but they're going to clutch at these straws. I think what will probably happen is that, like, chances are, I don't think the prosecution are going to offer anything other than just straight, you can plead guilty to murder and not get the death penalty. I wonder if David, deep down, whether he would take a plea if he could admit to the PDF charges but get off on the murder. Now, as somebody that's following this case so closely, I know based on the evidence that he's cooked. So the prosecution, it's not like, oh, it's a bit of a could go either way. The prosecution maybe will knock him down to manslaughter. It's so obvious based on the evidence that he allegedly murdered this girl. But basically, I think that he doesn't really have any options, so he's going to clutch some straws. What I think he is hoping to come out of the other side of this, they're not going to dispute the PDF charges, even though they don't have any offer on the table. Like, if they were in a better position and the evidence wasn't so damning, they might be able to go to the prosecution and say, look, can you drop the murder? We'll plead down to the PDF charges. We'll take a big bunch of years on those. We'll save the state a massive, expensive trial. I don't think he's going to do that. But then I feel like he'll go into it with the hope that the best result he could possibly get is that he doesn't get convicted on the murder based on lack of evidence, and he's banged to rights on the PDF charges. And then he'll just know, okay, at least I'm not getting life. I'm not getting death penalty. I still don't think he'll pull that off. I think him pulling that off is such a long shot, but that's the best possible outcome, that he could basically just bank on the fact that the body was left in such a badly decomposed state. Maybe they could attack the medical examiner. Maybe the LAPD withholding all this information for so long, maybe that actually won't work in their favor, and he might actually find his way to kind of trash the medical examiner's report. And if he can put enough doubt in the jury's mind about the medical examiner's report, he can basically kind of convince them that the whole narrative that she was stabbed, if that's not reliable and the body was in such a bad way, and maybe he might go with the narrative that the car was stolen. I think that's just ridiculous. I think she overdosed and panics. But that's the thing. He doesn't need to come to court and say, this is the overdose theory. They just need to say he didn't do it, and there's not enough evidence. Poke holes in all the evidence that the state put forward, and then basically just keep quiet. And then they'll find him guilty on the PDF charges. He could beat the murderer based on that, if he can completely trash the autopsy results, and if there's some other explanation that he could find for the stuff getting delivered to his house. I mean, the fact that does work into his favor is like, okay, the burn cage wasn't used, the chainsaw was used, the kiddie pool was used, it was used in the room. But again, it's like, he could get charged with the desecrating the corpse. But again, if they can't prove the murder, if the stab wounds that the autopsy have revealed, somehow he manages to finesse it that that's not allowed, he might be able to beat the murder. And then it's like, okay, well, the chainsaw, you can prove he chopped up the body, but you can't prove he did the murder. You can prove he brought her to the house, but you can't prove he did the murder. But I think there's so much premeditation in there that I just think, there's always a chance. So people saying defense or prosecutors always present their own experts. Some people saying the defense sometimes presents little to no witnesses at all, fearing they could end up in a deeper hole. The best defense here would be the some other guy defense, but they would have to name him and have some evidence or non-expert witnesses to place him or her at the murder scene. Someone very close to David and with access to Celeste that night and to the Tesla afterwards. Someone using David's credit card to order the cleanup and dismemberment equipment, and someone who drove the Tesla more than once to Lake Kahuma. And doesn't the Tesla have cameras? Saying that, look, there ain't no way, right? So some other guy did it, a guy that knew Celeste was on her way to David's house and then was able to snatch her up before arriving to David's house, then drop the body in David's trunk, then logged into his accounts and ordered a shovel, 2 chainsaws, body bags, burn page, and clay. Yeah, it was ridiculous. Let's just say what happened. Wouldn't David ask who's ordering those items once he saw him at his house? It's obvious he was still using the black Tesla. At some point, he would have smelled the decomposing body. Wouldn't he have tried to figure out why there was a smell in the car? The thing that's not out is the cell tower data. I'm sure they will be able to point out that Celeste's phone and David's phone are in the exact location. Not sure how they'll tackle with that theory. So it says, one thing's for sure. If he pleads innocent, the forensics and autopsy results will be extensively discussed. The fact she was stabbed through her clothing and that the weapon touched the bone will help to analyze the attack. My guess is that she was stabbed from behind, hence the lying in wait circumstance. Plus, she shows no defense wounds. I don't think that's true. I think there were defensive wounds. Add to that internal bleeding, then it is difficult to refute first-degree murder with lying in wait. Lying in wait just means it was planned and coordinated. Okay, we get the gist. Let's see a new thread of information. So saying the problem is I think it can be proved whether or not the wounds were caused before or after her death, so it seems like a weak defense. So she had internal bleeding from the cut to her liver. If you die from an overdose, it's not possible to bleed after you die. Forensic pathologists can easily distinguish between an injury inflicted before death, antemortem, or one inflicted after death, post-mortem, and examining how the wound bled. So that is true, but if they can somehow cast enough doubt into the autopsy that the jury don't see it as credible, then he might actually have something. So it says, agree, they didn't deny the dismemberment or essay allegations, so it seems they'll just focus on cause of death. Maybe they say she got the injuries post-mortem, but then why would anyone stab a dead body? Makes no sense unless they're blaming someone else. Most likely scenario is they try and cast as much doubt as possible without actually saying he didn't stab her. It says the coroner can tell whether the person was still alive. All right, we get it. We don't need to go around that in circles. So it says there's no defense for all of this. There just isn't. I also think they have enough digital evidence to put the puzzle pieces together for any jury. He says, well, he is going to try something. He isn't going to go in there and say, I did it. It says, Blair Burke made this statement before discovery. Now she has all the damning evidence in her hand. She might advise him to plead guilty and mental health disorder or drug-induced psychotic episode. His best option is life with parole, which would see him a free man around 50 years old. But it says, I doubt the DA will even offer a plea deal in this. They have alleged special circumstances. If any plea deal is done, it would be to taking the death penalty off the table. California hasn't executed anyone since early 2000s, so to me that would be an obvious thing to give away. They're definitely not giving up parole. No way. Hence why I think him fighting the murder makes sense. If you're getting life without parole, you might as well go out swinging. People saying the only acceptable plea would be life without parole. He never needs to walk among the population again. He says, I think once it gets going and all the evidence is laid out, he'll take a plea. He's not going to want everyone to hear all the gory detail, at minimum his parents. And it says, you are right. The defense, when there will be a trial at all, will come up with a strategy, either to just dig holes into the story, evidence, or timeline of the prosecution, or they actually will present their own story. I think it's possible they say that Burke stabbed her because they were fighting and he lost control or whatever. Then he felt guilty and tried to get rid of her body, but couldn't success. Because he felt so guilty or anxious, blah, blah, blah. Or another story, just to get rid of the first-degree murder to second-degree murder or something else. Besides Blair Burke, he has another lawyer on the team that's actually helped a client go from first-degree murder to manslaughter. You can Google it if you're interested. I'm not sure if they're going to do the overdose story. Personally, I don't think they will. At the end, when there's a trial, I don't expect Burke to pay for a Lori Vallow defense. He can do that with cheaper lawyers. That's a good point. It says, I thought of that too, considering they have Celeste on video yelling and being aggressive towards her neighbors, that can work. I don't know, or I don't care. I don't know, I just thought the overdose angle would work. Now I don't know. Even if she did overdose, he was dating a child, provided a child with drugs and dismembered a child. It does not help him at all. But people are saying, yes, it does help him. Look at the maximum time he can do for all the other counts. If you take the murder charge away and he successfully beats it, you're talking about a significant reduction of time in prison. He is going to rot in prison. That's what people are going to say. That's my prediction too. A lot of seemingly knowledgeable commentators have noted something similar. Basically, they believe the defense team is really going to try and exploit any degree of uncertainty in the medical examiner's report. They use qualifying language like may in certain spots. Then there's just the fact of how severely decomposed she was and how that could impact the examination. I thought about the other charges and the idea that maybe the defense will take a knee on those, but I kind of think that's a bit risky. Jurors will be able to use their common sense. Here's what I mean. David committed statutory R-word in his relationship with Celeste. She threatened to go public and ruin his career. She traveled to his house in an Uber he sent to her home 90 minutes away. The prosecution says they have evidence she arrived at his home at 10:10 p.m. that evening and her phone ceased all activity about 20 minutes later. Considering she was a young teenager, this is going to be seen as very unusual and a sign something went wrong. The prosecutors are using this as part of the evidence for her time of death, and it happened relatively quickly upon her arrival. He didn't call 911 or take her to an emergency room. Instead, he stood by and let her die, according to the prosecutor. And again, why did her phone all of a sudden cease all activity? Was her phone connected to her biometrics so that when she died, so did her phone? Highly unlikely, lol. So the last piece place that she was seen alive was in his house. As for the dismemberment, his Amazon purchases of 2 chainsaws and a blue inflatable pool, they should be able to prove the tool marks are consistent with one of the chainsaws. The prosecution has said they have proof the blue plastic bits found in Celeste's dismemberment wounds match the pool in the garage. The DNA collected from the blood that was collected from multiple biological samples in the garage matched Celeste. She was placed in a body bag which David purchased on Amazon. David made 3 separate trips to destroy evidence, and the most damning, in my opinion, her decayed and dismembered body was found in his car. So to recap, why would you dismember somebody who died because of an overdose or a medical emergency? Why would their phone have all of a sudden stopped? Why would you take steps to try and ensure they didn't die? Why would you leave her in your car to rot and take 3 trips totaling 12 hours total to destroy the evidence? And she just so happened to die the day after she made a threat to ruin your burgeoning career. It's going to be really hard to convince a jury to reasonably believe that while he did repeatedly essay and dismember her after her death, that he also didn't kill her. Facts. Long shot. All right. Super long shot. This says, I figured the reason the defense worded things as they did is because nobody knew a cause of death had been determined until the cause of death was announced in court. They were likely banking on a lack of specific cause, and now they're having to pivot. It could also lend to the fact they demanded preliminary hearing in 10 days, but now there's been a delay as they go through all the evidence. So this is prior to a case being called. The attorney meets the client. They go over the allegations. I'm sure she was aware of the details as soon as she got into the office and walked into the courtroom and picked up the report. She also could have downloaded the report via LA Superior Court portal. Prior to meeting with David, she would have been missing the 40 terabytes of discovery. She was careful with her words for a reason. And since then, the plea report has been made available to them, but she's still missing 40 terabytes of discovery. They said that before they got any discovery or knew any details of what the prosecution had, said they're going to do anything to disprove, discredit, and slander Celeste instead of taking accountability. A defender's job in court is to prove that there's a chance he didn't do it, and that Celeste isn't here to defend herself or tell her side of the story. It's sickening, but that's what his defense will end up doing. My hopeful self wants to think that he will end up somehow doing the right thing and telling the truth on the stand. The way he's allegedly behaved in court, I do not think that will be the case. It says, from the high level of narcissistic behavior traits, consistently using manipulation, entitlement, and arrogance to maintain his social dominance he's shown publicly for many years now and right up to the present moment, there's no way in my mind he will take any form of accountability. I agree. So they might say a friend of his did it. So they say the defense requires that they be specific. They have to reveal this defense at the preliminary hearing or when they first get the evidence that someone else was involved. They can't just say it at trial. They could hint at it in opening arguments and in closing, but unless they have someone specific and evidence to support that person's arrest, it's not going to be allowed in court. Some unknown person, not David Burke, is not going to fly as a defense in this case. It's a timeline problem. Her phone activity stopped as soon as the Uber dropped her off, and 20 minutes later he texts asking where she is. That's a pretty quick drug overdose. Ooh, that's true. Her toxicology showed low levels of ethanol also. I agree the defense team will have to get imaginative, and I feel that will be distancing the accused from the actual murder. But at the minute, it was like a duck quack. It walks like a duck and quacks like a duck. The defense will argue the manner of death because it was first written unknown and then changed to homicide. It says you also have to consider the dismemberment. If he was scared when she overdosed, doesn't really follow that he would then begin chopping her up with a chainsaw and send texts to try and act like he didn't see her. That's facts. If the overdose thing is true, which is not, obviously, but if he's going to try and pull that card, you texting her pretending you don't know where she is ain't a good look. So it says it's obvious he meant to burn her body to ashes but never got around to it. That's why he chopped her up. I take it would be easier for the body to burn in that cage. It makes sense if you try getting rid of a body that you killed and tried playing it off like she never made it to your home. Text. Had he managed to burn the body, he probably would have gotten away with it. That's something I often think about. If he had burned the body, would he have gotten away with it? And I think, honestly, I think he might have. I think the police maybe weren't so smart in this one. And, they came and told him she was a minor and they didn't really do anything. She was going back and forth and no one ever stepped in, no CPS, no nothing, right? So I wonder if realistically she would have just disappeared forever if he'd have actually managed to burn her. And it's so sad to even think of that. So it says they're trying to use the fact that they have no murder weapon, no chainsaw, and no real proof he did it with his hands. While it's fairly obvious to us, that alone isn't proof beyond reasonable doubt. And that's really all they need. The judicial system works in that way. They're probably just trying to wipe the death penalty off the table. They know he's cooked with the illegal stuff on his phone, but they can try and avoid. But it says you do not prove reasonable doubt. The jury decides that there isn't enough evidence as a whole to convict. Reasonable exists in their minds. We can't use the contents of people's minds as proof. It is indeed an exercise in reason. The jury may well have to be death penalty qualified, and they will have to unanimously find him guilty after careful consideration of all the evidence. There are tons of convictions when no murder weapon was found. Scott Peterson's a good example. Charles Manson's another one. I agree their first goal is to get the death penalty off the table, but given the high-profile nature of this case and the incredibly powerful visual evidence, including the illegal videos, it will be a battle. One reason to agree to get rid of the death penalty would be a plea bargain, basically David admitting that the best he can hope for is life without parole. The other would be fear of jury nullification, which is why they do pursue the death penalty. They want a death penalty qualified jury, which doesn't always mean all jurors can actually see their way to a clear verdict that could result in someone's death. What they don't want is any defense that would cause the prosecution to actually start showing all the visual evidence in this case, because right now the prosecution is planning to call investigators to talk about the evidence, not actually show the pictures. Okay, and that's probably for the best. They're saying, so I think somebody posted something similar to this before. Someone in the comments said the defense doesn't have to prove that he didn't do it. They just have to prove the evidence is not accurate to what the prosecution is claiming. It says the prosecutor that has to prove David is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the defense's job to provide alternatives and cast doubt. So it's saying they would be able to tell whether she was stabbed post-mortem, but again, are they going to discredit the medical examiner's report? Yes, probably. Most likely. So it says David could use the concussion defense because he hit his head at Coachella. Concussions are temporary brain damage that could last a couple of weeks. Concussions can also make you violent. It's a long shot. Apparently, David panicked so much he stabbed her twice through the torso. The judge will laugh at David if he says that. More like the jury. Okay? It will be a jury. Says they have him dead to rights on chopping her up. No one stumbles across a corpse that someone else murders and buys the things to chop them up, chops them up, and tosses them in the trunk. That's why I don't think they're going to say someone else did it. I think they will go with the, yeah, I'm a PDF and I chopped her up, but I didn't kill her angle. She OD'd on my house, judge. It says, nah, they know he waited for her to arrive at his house, and him texting her where she was is sus as F. He's guilty. There's no way around this, no matter how rich or how much money you have. So ultimately, I agree. I'm just speculating on the defenses. If I'm the prosecution and the defense argues that she died of an overdose, I'm personally taking the defense to the finest dinner possible for making it so easy to lock this worthless PDF up. I don't understand why anyone's worried about this psychopath getting off. The jury is going to see through these BS arguments. They won't fall for this. Ain't no way. All right? Ain't no way. She didn't have drugs in her system. Please stop making up your own theories. Wait till the trial happens. It wasn't conclusive that she had serious drugs. Like, they said she might have had some prescription Adderall in her system, perhaps, and some ethanol could have been from decomposing. Anyway, you don't know the kind of defenses lawyers will use, so don't assume things. Duh. We're just trying to get to the bottom of this. All right, well, we'll wrap it up there, okay? So, look, I do think that David's best bet is to just not address anything. Try and just cast as much doubt as he possibly can on the medical examiner's report, perhaps on... I mean, what else can you... really, what else can you say? Like, she was... It's not... If he'd have succeeded in burning her and getting rid of the body, like, there's so much more doubt that could have been cast in the absence of a body, but we have the body was in your Tesla. I don't think it's going to fly. I think we're going to see somebody truly clutch at straws and flail and go out sad in this trial. And again, I think he'll take it all the way. I think he will take it all the way to the end, and I think he's just going to crash and burn. That's just what I think. Okay, let me know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the video, okay, make sure you check out my other David videos. I made a little David playlist, so go and check that out. It might be on the screen. But yeah, I've got really, really interesting stuff about people that knew what was going on with David and Celeste before it became public. I'm talking years before, and I'm going to update you guys in a video about that probably tomorrow. I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I'm going through, and I just want to organize it well so I can present it to you guys well. But I've definitely found some really interesting stuff today. So stay tuned. Going to have a bunch more updates over the next few days. I've really definitely feel like I've had a breakthrough on some information. So I'm excited to share some of this stuff with you. But I want to just keep doing my research in between videos. And this was just a post that I thought I wanted to react to because I thought it was really interesting. I wanted to dig into it with you guys. So hope you found that useful, man. I'll catch you guys in the next video. For now, I'm out, guys. Peace.